Number 10. Bishop. As some of you pointed out in the comments on the part 1 of this list, a lot of 90s characters, especially 90s X-Men, have completely different looks in the modern day when compared with their 90s appearances. Lucas Bishop is definitely one such character. Although he still has his M tattoo over his eye and a few details in his costume that pay homage to his original look, Bishop has definitely seen some changes, some of which might be so great that fans may not at first recognize him. While he still often is seen with his XSE guns and even still sports a red bandana, Bishop is now a member of the Marauders. Gone are the days of those 90s X-Men colors, and modern day Bishop dresses mainly in reds and blacks, in homage as well to his role as the Hellfire Trading Company's Red Bishop. Also, I love that Bishop is the Red Bishop because he's a bishop and his name's Bishop, it's crazy. Number 9. Crystal. Crystal's initial appearance had her recognizable mainly by her ginger or strawberry blonde hair and a simple white dress. I personally always thought of Crystal as being ginger, but then I see so many different versions of her where she has like maybe blonde hair. So I don't know, but I've always thought of her as a ginger. She is known for being the younger sister of Medusa, who is the Inhuman Queen and true love of Black Bolt. Crystal has had a few different looks, but generally she has longer ginger hair and is either in a yellow suit or a Fantastic Four suit when she was, you know, on that team. She has been known for dating Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, was once married to Quicksilver and had a daughter with him, and she was even for a time married to Ronan the Accuser. Yeah, it's been an interesting dating history I feel like for Crystal. All in all, Crystal has had a sort of wild life, and while her costume has changed gradually, comparing her short blonde haired self in her yellow and black diamond suit to her first appearance with long ginger-like hair in her white dress, looks like a dress to me, and you might not know it's Crystal at first glance. And friends, if you want even more lists where we talk about all the glow ups in comics and I guess some of the glow downs, if that's a thing, be sure to let us know that you love this list by giving it a thumbs up. Number 8. PYRO. PYRO might be sporting a very similar suit when it comes to how he looked in his first appearance, but he also now has a skull tattoo. A full face skull tattoo. And honestly, I have come to love it. Not only that, but this version of PYRO was also originally known as a villain, and like many on the island nation of Krakoa, has been given a new lease on life where he no longer needs to be a villain. Instead, recently, PYRO has exclusively acted as a hero, fighting alongside his shipmates and teammates, the Marauders. During his time with the Marauders team, St. John Allardyce ended up taking refuge with his fellow teammates in a tattoo parlor. A few of them decided to get tats while they were there, PYRO included. He decided to get a full face tattoo, getting a black skull tattooed over top his face. And I gotta say, it's just been growing on me more and more every time I read Marauders. At first, after he got this tat, I was expecting, like so many other Krakoans, that PYRO would end up dying and then being resurrected, erasing the tattoo from his face. After all, who needs tattoo removal when you have resurrection protocols, and mutants dying and returning is no longer really a big deal at all. Although I'm sure the Healing Gardens could remove PYRO's tattoo almost as easily. Still, he hasn't gotten it removed or died and been brought back without it yet, so while you might wonder who that is with the skull face tattoo, it seems that it's becoming part of PYRO's modern day look quite seamlessly. So maybe in 10 years from now we'll be like, oh yeah, it's PYRO because the skull face tattoo. Maybe he'll still have it.
At number 7 is Connor Kent. Con-El is one of the many people to take on the mantle of Superboy, and it seems like his look has changed more than your average hero. He's also known to be a clone of another more real son of Superman, which I suppose leads him to run into some identity issues, which could be part of it. But he most often appears to look like this high school bad boy with the spiked leather jacket look, but he's also got the black and red supersuit, and at times has also presented a lot like the classic Superman with the blue, red, and yellow costume as well. But that's kind of my point. It's hard to know whether you're looking at Con-El or John Kent or even another Superboy from an alternate dimension, because he doesn't seem to have decided on one look, and he's pretty hard to recognize, especially these days as his time goes by. At number 6 we have Wonder Woman. Now, a couple newer comics make this hero a bit different than what we're used to. During a one-shot in 2020 called called Future State, the Wonder Woman mantle is taken on by Yara Flor, who takes the place of Princess Diana while she's away for a time. Sporting a totally new costume with a handful of different weapons, this iteration of the hero just gives us a totally new look at who Wonder Woman could be. More recently, near the end of 2021, a younger iteration of Yara Flor appears in the Infinite Frontier series as Wonder Girl, offering the new status quo of what the DC universe might look like moving forward. But aside from the Wonder Woman mantle being taken on by a new character, there is another series that leads right up until the end of 2021 called Wonder Woman Black and Gold, in which multiple different art styles are employed to give us a totally new aesthetic to the Wonder Woman story itself. Although there is a continuation of the traditional Wonder Woman storyline running into 2022, there are also some alternatives to the character that have been released right up until this year that give us a whole new look into how the character could be portrayed. At number 5 is the Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn. As if this villain wasn't enough of a contender for Spidey to deal with before, he actually takes on the Carnage symbiote, turning him into the Red Goblin as mentioned before. This makes him nearly unstoppable, forcing the good guys to employ anti-venom on him in order to take him out for good. And even though he has since gone back to being the Green Goblin, the character takes another turn that makes him unrecognizable from his past self during the events of Kindred Rising. And by unrecognizable, I mean that he's now working with Spider-Man. When Sin Eater cleanses Norman of his sins, his allegiances change and he becomes a hero. At number 4 we have Dr. Doom. These days, Dr. Doom has taken on some pretty unstoppable powers that some would even describe as being godlike. Big fans of Victor Von Doom might have expected him to reach a point like this at some point because of his insatiable hunger for power, but as of 2022, he's already surpassed at least my expectations of what he was capable of. Although they haven't stuck around until the time that we're posting this, he has taken the powers of the Silver Surfer and even the Beyonder, giving him a whole new mantle of God Emperor Doom during the Secret Wars storyline. Just for scale, this gave Dr. Doom the ability to piece together broken pieces of the universe after the multiversal collapse. And that's a pretty crazy glow up if you ask me. And even if he doesn't hold quite that much power these days, having had that ability has changed the character forever, if you ask me. At number 3 is DARKSEID. Originally introduced as a nearly unstoppable supervillain and one of the most powerful in the whole DC universe, DARKSEID's powers have been dumbed down quite a bit since then. Although he appears the same, his immense power level just isn't the same these days as it always was. For example, his eye beams were originally meant to kill his targets in one hit, but these days, they don't by any means take out their targets in one hit. He used to be almost unbeatable, but it seems like heroes are making easier work of him than ever as of late. This is probably a result of him appearing more often in the comics, because if he'd kept his same unstoppable status, his appearances would have to be regulated, or else our heroes would be out of commission in the blink of an eye. At number 2 is Anti-Monitor. Another case of a villain getting nerfed. Anti-Monitor's gotten it bad these days. If you thought DARKSEID got taken down a notch, just think how much room there would be to do the same with Anti-Monitor, because he is, after all, the most powerful being in the DC multiverse. Just to get an idea of what I mean, back in the day, Anti-Monitor takes out multiple universes alone before he reaches ours, and then once he does, it takes a hell of a lot to take him down. In fact, it became one of the most notable moments in all of the DC comics when they did, because it was so difficult. But when he returns from his defeat and joins the Sinestro Corps, he just seems to be in a totally different echelon of power, a lesser one, to the point where the Justice League can take him out on their own these days, which is just weird to see for fans who knew his power level back in the day. At number 1 is the Batman Who Laughs. Enough with the downgrades, because this guy's change is a glow up if I've ever seen one. These days, the Batman Who Laughs has gained so much power that he's known to be basically godlike, and he finds these new powers in the place that he comes from, the Dark Multiverse. After finding a Dr. Manhattan powered Batman in the Dark Multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs gets his mind transferred into the body of that hero, acquiring the greater part of Dr. Manhattan's abilities, but with the sinister touch of his usual self as well. The only way that he's able to be taken down is when Wonder Woman finds a way to match his power level herself and defeats him despite his insane power boost.
Number 10. Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9. Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated Tnalf the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating Tnalf so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be Tnalf, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veranke, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Enel, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veranke? What? Not Veranke, two different people. Number 8. KRAVEN the Hunter. You might think you recognize KRAVEN, but do you really? After all, the current KRAVEN that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than KRAVEN's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of KRAVEN was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravinoff, the KRAVEN himself. As such, this clone of KRAVEN was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of KRAVEN the Hunter. So while he may look like KRAVEN, albeit a younger version of him, this KRAVEN the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of KRAVEN made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as the Last Son.
At number 7 we have Doomsday. The primary change with Doomsday isn't something that's been gained, but something that's been lost. A very notable power of his actually, and that is his hyper adaptability. In fact, I would even argue that this was his main power, and what it meant was he could learn from past losses in battle and change his physiology to prevent himself from being killed in the same way twice. I don't know why this has been dropped, because aside from it being the defining characteristic of Doomsday, it was just a really fun ability to watch because it made every encounter with the villain a new challenge for the heroes, which would ultimately make for an exciting read. But for whatever reason, this power has basically been left in the dust, making Doomsday that much less unique from any other bruiser type villain, at least in my opinion. At number 6 we have Dr. Octopus. Something that the less avid readers may not know about this villain is that he's been going back and forth between heroism and villainy for some time now. And not only that, Otto Octavius has recently taken on the mantle of Spider-Man, donning the superior Spider-Man armor outfitted with the mechanical arms and everything. He's also been taken over by Venom recently, as well as the Carnage symbiote. Although he's known to be back to his evil ways and his classic suit in 2022, there is no telling if he'll jump back into the Spidey suit once more. He's already gone back and forth a number of times, even in the last few years, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did it again. And at number 5 we have Gambit. Back in 1990 when the character was introduced, he didn't strike me as much of a pretty boy as he seems to be portrayed today. But now, his charm has become actual part of his power set known as Hypnotic Charm. Now, with this new storyline being dropped later this month, I can't confirm what I don't know about the official 2022 version of the character, but in recent years Gambit has changed quite a bit, at least in certain portrayals. Partly with his newer Hypnotic Charm power, but also with his abilities he acquired during his time as the Horseman of Death for Apocalypse. During this time he gains a set of newer, darker abilities that usually aim to kill, and even further, after blinding himself with an exploding card, Gambit learns how to see the future somehow, which is a big deal for a character that has always otherwise just been concerned strictly with kinetic energy and things of the like. And although these days he has renounced the title of Horseman of Death, he still might have the ability to disintegrate his targets through molecular acceleration. In his new self-titled series, however, we'll see him paired up with a child version of Storm, which will tell the story of how Gambit came to be an X-Man. So maybe the character will get back to something closer to his original portrayal, whether we want that or not, but we'll see. At number 4 is Iceman, another character that is being endowed with a whole new range to his power set. Iceman these days appears to have the ability to conjure up ice beasts on command and freeze his targets on a molecular level. Some argue that the level that Bobby Drake has brought his powers to at this point has given him status as an Omega Mutant, which is a far cry from the days he was riding ice slides and throwing snowballs. Still having these ice slide abilities at his disposal, Iceman seems to favor his god level powers these days, and for good reason. I just didn't expect the young Robert Drake from the old X-Men cartoons to have come so far as to be able to create living beings from scratch, but crazier things have happened in the last few years. At number 3 we have Magneto, who seems to have reached a new level of power these days, with his magnetokinesis now being applied to the whole electromagnetic spectrum. He gains a whole new set of abilities. As of late, Magneto has been showing off his gravity-defying powers, radiation absorption, and even light manipulation, allowing him to turn himself and others invisible. So yeah, if you didn't think that having total control over all the metals in the universe was enough, Magneto is now these days able to control light. So there's that. I mean, to an extent. At one point he even makes Dazzler punch herself in the face with her own light-based powers, which is pretty OP if you ask me, but it's still the old Magneto we've always known somewhere in there. He looks roughly the same. He's just developed quite a bit since the old days, and we're excited to see where he goes from this year onward. At number 2 we have Jubilee. Jubilee has always typically been known as a bit of a pushover, having a pretty passive power set under her belt. She was able to shoot fireworks on command, and that was sort of it. She was always a fun person and was great at distracting enemies, but in terms of sheer power, she wasn't gonna land high on a list if she was ranked among her peers. But in the last couple of years, this character has undergone a total transformation, and what turns out to be known as Lumikinetic Explosive Light Blasting is a power that could be tapped more than just creating small bursts of fireworks on command. These days, Jubilee is able to create literal explosions, sometimes even considered to be nuclear level. Not only this, but over the last couple of years she has also spent a good stint as a vampire, which just makes the character even more different from what we've always been used to leading into 2022. At number 1 we have Batman from Dark Knights of Steel. In this new limited series that is being released as we speak, if you're watching this in 2022 when it was posted, Batman is being given a total medieval makeover. Along with other DC characters, Batman navigates a medieval landscape of dragons and ancient magic, donning not only a suit of armor but a sword as well, which really takes the concept of the Dark Knight to more of a literal degree than I think any of us were ever expecting. But honestly, it works for me. These days, Batman has become a character and a franchise franchise for that matter, that is being openly explored through various different lenses in the comics and in the movies. And people seem to be openly inviting more and more off the walls portrayals of the character, no matter how different they appear from the original. And in the Dark Knights of Steel, we're seeing yet another example of this, where Batman isn't even being set in the same time period anymore. But even though he may be somewhat unrecognizable from, let's say, the Tom King series, I feel like this has become something that fans of Batman have gotten used to over the years. At number 10 is Despero. Although Despero has always been totally jacked, he was originally known as more of a threat to the Justice League through mind manipulation. During the Silver Age, he would only typically use his telepathic powers before anything else, but these days, it's a different story. Although these changes did start to take place way back in the 80s, the character has come a long way since the days when he would sit on his throne and twiddle his fingers most of the time. Now, he seems to do a lot of the grunt work himself, even looking larger in size these days than ever before. And even outside of the comics, Despero's appearance in the Arrowverse offers a totally different look into the villain. He takes on a human form for much of the time, who is, well, let's just say he's not as big as Despero, nor does he have much musculature to him, no offense to that actor. Nor does he have a third eye or anything that a comic book fan would expect, and when he's in proper form, he just seems a lot less demonic and cunning, more like Hellboy's very serious detective older brother or something like that. At number 9 we have Anton Arcane. The penultimate villain to Swamp Thing, Anton Arcane has always been a threat as one of the most prolific evil scientists in all of DC. But when Swamp Thing finally kills Anton during one of their many confrontations, back in 2016 I think, the villain goes to hell and basically becomes a demon. Having been a pretty tame foe for most of the Swamp Thing comics, Anton Arcane's physical changes have made him almost unrecognizable now that he's a demon. And what's worse is that he continues to bother Swamp Thing and his niece Abigail, but now with the added demonic powers in mind. So he's changed quite a bit, both in looks and power set. At number 8 we have Psycho Pirate. The way that this villain has changed since the Infinite Crisis event is unmatched. Although he looks relatively the same, he's gained such a power boost that he now works with the likes of DARKSEID and Alexander Luthor. After surviving the crisis, he comes out on top, getting his hands on what's known as the Medusa Mask. And what this helps him do is basically summon beings from the old multiverse, which, as you can imagine, is a very powerful ability, especially directly following the event itself. And even though he's been killed by Black Adam during the events of Blackest Night, Psycho Pirate's corpse is brought back to life as a Black Lantern. And as you can imagine, this gives him a whole new look and increases his power level. He loses the Medusa Mask in this ghoulish form, but even without it, he appears totally different than how we're used to seeing him.
Number 7, Flash Thompson, or as he's currently known, Agent Anti-Venom. Still, it's pretty wild to think that Flash Thompson, aka Eugene Thompson, started out as Peter Parker's bully back in the day. Flash has come a long way from being an antagonist to a friend of Peter's to a full-on war hero and later superhero. He's battled alcoholism, became an amputee, and even traveled into space where he fought alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you only knew Flash from his first appearance, or vice versa, you only knew him from modern day comics, you'd probably be shocked to see just how different the character is, how far he has come, and how much he has grown and evolved. He even became such a popular character among fans that he got to join the Resurrection Club, being returned to life recently after dying during the fight against Red Goblin. Number 6, Cable. In recent years, Cable has had a completely new look, considering that his old version died and was replaced with his younger version. Of course, his older version has since returned, but there was a good amount of time there in the comics when you might have been confused as to just who exactly you were reading about. Is Kid Cable meant to be Nathan's son, you might have thought, or is he some like de-aged version of Nathan Summers? Well, the latter is the correct assumption if you made it. Young Cable actually hunted his older self down, in essence completing his time loop. But of course, the old man still existed out there, and if you went to the right point and place in time, he would still be living earlier portions of his life. As such, we were able to bring Old Man Cable back in the comics, and young Cable actually realized that he would also have to leave and let the old man basically take over, as while he thought he knew it all, young and all, that's what young people usually think. They think they know it all. It turns out he still has lots to learn. Honestly though, I love both versions of Cable, and I wish that old Cable could team up with his younger self on more occasions. I want like a kid Cable and old man Cable team up comic.
Halfway through into number 5, Green Arrow. Haha, you knew this was gonna happen. The Arrowverse crossover event Crisis on Infinite Earths had been in the process of setup for a while, with the previous Elseworlds crossover just being one big commercial for it basically, and the seasons leading up to it revolving mostly around what could happen in Crisis. One of these issues was the death of Oliver Queen, which shockingly was carried out in the first part of the crossover. After bringing Oliver back to life at the Lazarus Pit on Earth 19, John Diggle, his daughter from the future Mia, and Constantine all traveled to Purgatory to retrieve his soul. But when he was about to go back with them, Jim Corrigan arrives with a way for Oliver to save everyone. This turns Oliver into the Spectre, basically the most powerful being in the multiverse, giving him the powers of a god, allowing Oliver to reboot the universe with the help of the Paragons, and also stopping the Anti-Monitor from securing the destruction of all Earths. He also ended up corrupting the Speed Force by empowering Barry, which resulted in the Speed Force dying for a time, which is a whole other can of worms I won't discuss. But needless to say, you wouldn't recognize this version of Green Arrow, especially since he's dead and you can't really see him. And at 4, Black Lightning. In Dark Knights of Steel, Superman finds his way to a medieval Earth where familiar DC favorites are recast in the Middle Ages. Batman is a young prince and John Constantine is an oracle. But perhaps the most unique transformation is that of Black Lightning, who now is a king, pursuing a mysterious agenda against Superman and his family. The character has not been regularly seen in the comics for some time, but returns in Dark Knights of Steel, which has got to be my personal favorite Earth so far, because medieval, cheese king, you get it. This time, Supes' parents actually made it to Earth along with him, and in the Kingdom of Storms, Kal-El's birth has triggered horrifying visions in a young John Constantine. As Constantine lays writhing on the ground, his mind is overwhelmed and he's dictating his visions to the royal scribe. The king arrives and readers see that it's Black Lightning. He's concerned over Constantine's visions and tells the scribe to write down everything the boy says. As Constantine comes out of his trance, he tells Black Lightning that the end is near. This is a pretty damn badass version of Black Lightning, similar to Black Panther in a way, since now Jefferson is rightfully a king. Respect. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Wonder Woman. The Dark Knight's death metal story wrapped up early 2021 with issue number 7, and in that issue and the issue before, we see Wonder Woman at her most powerful, in a godlike form that's even more powerful than a god. As the comic puts it, quote, "She has been a god before, but at this moment she's more. At this point she has ascended past godhood and can see all of time and all realities." Okay, she sees like every Earth's timeline, and she faces off against the Batman who laughs in his most powerful form as well. This fight is so intense that they hit each other through time itself. Diana here is charged with anti-crisis energy, a connective force that links all history and all lives as one story. Then she moves on to become one of the hands that created the multiverse going forward, with no walls and greater possibilities. She aids in creating the future state story we see in the next issues, and what was seemingly the centerpiece of DC 2021. So Wonder Woman becoming a god and remaking the universe, while very Oliver Queen as Spectre, still a pretty damn dramatic change. Penultimately, into number 2, Dreamer. Nia Nal, also known by her code name Dreamer, is a fictional superhero from the Arrowverse television series Supergirl, portrayed by Nicole Maines. The character is based on and is depicted as an ancestor of the DC Comics character Noura Nal, also known as Dream Girl. She debuts in the 4th season of the series, and Nia Nal is the first transgender superhero on television. In March 2021, it was announced that Nia Nal would feature and make her comic debut in a story written by Maines to be published in a Pride-themed comic book anthology on June 8th, 2021. Mostly, you won't recognize her because she was a character really created by the show, even if she was intended to be a present version of Dream Girl. Nia Nal's powers include precognition and astral projection. On July 21st, 2018, trans activist and actress Nicole Maines was announced in the role at the show's San Diego Comic-Con panel. It was also confirmed that Nia would become the superhero Dreamer and that she is an ancestor of the Legion of Superheroes member Noura Nal. Maines described Dreamer as having this ferocious drive to protect people and to fight against discrimination and hatred. She's the superhero we need right now. The character is the first transgender superhero on television, and honestly, I think that it was worth it for this list. And finally, into number 1, Batman. Batman in Dark Knights of Steel, a new limited series from DC featuring your favorite heroes and villains as medieval knights, has made a load of changes to the character in this world. One of the biggest changes being to Batman. Bruce is the knight assigned to protect the king and queen of House L, as well as their son Cal, like how Link was assigned to protect Zelda in the story of Breath of the Wild. However, However, he seems to be more than just a mere man, able to withstand a banshee cry, in this case being Black Canary's cry. When it really should have killed him, he only bled from his ears. Even he was confused and worried that he had magic inside him, so he told Jor-El, who came to Earth along with his wife and son before Krypton exploded, that he should be banished for their sake. That's when, spoiler alert for the first issue, it's revealed that Bruce is really the result of an affair between Jor-El and Martha. So Batman is now part Kryptonian, while also basically being a Witcher. Oh wait, hold on, okay. He's ostracized because he's a bastard, and now he's secretly part Kryptonian? Yeah, Bruce Wayne is literally a Witcher, confirmed.
At number 10 we have Dreamer, or Dream Girl, who doesn't quite resemble the way she used to appear in the original comics. That's because in the CW series Supergirl, Neuronal is now Nia-Nal, and aside from her costume making a decent change, the character is actually quite different as well. Most notably, Dreamer is known to be the first transgender superhero to appear on TV, played by Nicole Maines, who is herself a transgender activist. But that's not all. The character is also quite a bit younger, and I mean, her hair isn't even blonde anymore, which I think is fair to note. She doesn't look quite the same. But either way, from the name change to the costume change to even an entire color palette shift, Dream Girl, now Dreamer, has metamorphosized into someone completely different. At number 9 we have Elongated Man. Not the most widely popular superhero to begin with, Elongated Man takes a rough turn in the Arrowverse when his costume is entirely reimagined in The Flash in one of the worst ways possible. Although he's sort of played off as a joke character in both the comics and the Flash series, it's still sad to see such an unimaginative portrayal of any hero, really. Although Ralph Dibny is mostly out of costume, he becomes known to be the worst dressed within the narrative of the show as well, throwing more oil on the fire of Elongated Man's memeability. But even aside from the costume, the character just appears much less boisterous than he typically does, with a younger disposition and somehow a down-to-earth vibe, even though he's Elongated Man. At least in the way that he appears serious while he's in costume, a total departure from the goofy, exaggerated image associated with Elongated Man in the comics. At number 8 we have Swamp Thing. This newer version of the character from Infinite Frontier is just insane. With the new host Levi Kamei, Swamp Thing takes a whole new turn in how he's presented. Well, not entirely. To be fair, Swamp Thing has always kind of been this big, nasty green monster, but something about this modern depiction of how the green takes over Levi's body turns what used to look like a big green beast into a massive green spaghetti monster, it looks like. An extremely terrifying spaghetti monster, to be exact. Although the character doesn't appear for long in the short-lived series, this is the most recent update we have on the Swamp Thing, and he's surely taken on a different vibe than he used to.
Number 7, Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6, Norman Osborn. Well, you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance. When it comes to his actions and his alignment, you might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemax. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot. And more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently. Number 5. Speedball, or as he was known for a good amount of time in the comics, Penance. Robert Baldwin initially got his powers after a lab experiment went awry. After being exposed to extra-dimensional radiation, Robbie found that when he was the target of a certain amount of force, his body would transform. Instead of him being harmed from said blow, he would produce a protective barrier, causing him to become basically like a human bouncy ball. He could use this energy to then shield others, blast opponents, or to even halt speeding projectiles in midair. Speedball would later join the New Warriors. However, later on he would be part of an incident at the center of the First Civil War, where 612 civilians were killed, including 60 children. This would prompt him to change in appearance and in mindset, becoming Penance, a spiky armored version of the character who had internal spikes in his suit to remind him of all the victims lost, as he felt personally responsible for their deaths. Speedball has since returned to his original appearance, but it has taken him time to recover both physically and mentally from his time as Penance. And he's kinda still on that road to recovery. He was Penance for a long time. Number 4. Angel. Angel is another mutant superhero who has gone through a ton of different looks in life. Most notably was his shift from having organic wings to techno-organic wings after he lost his organic wings when he became one of Apocalypse's horsemen. The crazy thing is that while Angel seems to appear as mostly his original version, there are times where you might be confused with him as to who is who, as he seems to kind of alternate right now in modern comics between his original form and his techno-organic form, Archangel. As far as I can tell, this hasn't been fully explained yet in the comics, though it has been acknowledged that this happens in a similar manner to his X-Corp partner, Monet. That is, when he gets more emotional or gets more angry, his techno-organic form seems to come out. This was alluded to at the end of issue 2 of X-Corp, their Hellfire Gala issue. And if there have been more explanations on this and I missed them, please feel free to tell me what issues I should in-depth read, because yeah, I feel like there's little details, but we haven't gotten like a full, here's how it is, let me break it down for you. Number 3. Nick Fury. While Nick Fury does look very different in modern day comics in comparison to classic comics, it is important to note that technically these are 2 different characters. Well, technically these are kind of like 3 different characters. Or 4 different characters. There's a lot of characters. The version of Nick Fury we saw in the MCU was actually inspired by the version of the character from the Ultimate Universe, who, fun fact, was also inspired in terms of appearances by Samuel L. Jackson, the very man who would end up playing him. In fact, a lot of the MCU characterization and even stories are inspired by the Ultimate Universe, the alternate reality of 1610, and the stories that went on there. The original Nick Fury of Earth 616 was actually a white man, but he would inevitably be replaced by a 1610 inspired alternate Fury after the original Nick Fury of 616 ended up kind of being transformed into a Watcher. The 1610 version of Fury and Samuel L. Jackson's take on the character would then be adapted for Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, and that's how we would get Nick Fury Jr., who is the son of the original Nick Fury from the comics and looks a lot like Jackson's 1610 inspired version from the MCU. See what I mean? There's lots of Nick Furies. People are like, Nick Fury changed, and I'm like, Nick Fury didn't change, there's just a lot of characters that came together. Number 2. Beast. Beast is one character that has gone through a massive amount of change since we first met Hank McCoy, the lovable vocabularian, scientist, and the X-Men's most bouncy team member, Beast. Back then, Hank was just a relatively large man with enormous feet and enormous hands, but his mutation continued to progress long after that first appearance, changing when he ended up forced to take a serum that he had created based around the hormone that causes mutation. As such, he mutated even farther, which became permanent after he didn't take the antidote quickly enough to thereafter revert the effects. This meant that Hank was now permanently even more muscular, agile, and now completely covered head to toe in gray fur. From there, his fur would become more blue, and over the years his appearance has become borderline lion-like or even kind of cat-like at times. Number 1. Star-Lord. Considering how much Peter Quill has changed with each era of comics, it could be hard for fans to recognize him in modern day. Once again, his appearance and power levels have changed so much. In his initial appearance compared to his modern look, he's basically unrecognizable. And if we go even farther back to the Peter Jason Quill of the 1970s, the Star-Lord of Earth 791 now, he is completely different. It should be noted though that shortly after the main continuity version was introduced in Thanos issue number 8, which came out in 2004, he was shortly after pretty radically changed when he appeared a few years later in Annihilation Conquest from 2007 to 2008, which is pretty much the version of Quill roughly that we have today. Although even then, he's still changed quite a bit. Quill more recently in the comics returned from Marinus, an extra-dimensional world where he lived unaging with his friends, partners, and his lovers, Mors and Aradia, for hundreds of years. He came back even more powerful than before he had left, and ended up joining forces once more with the Guardians of the Galaxy to defend the cosmos against the return of the Dark Olympians.
And at 10, Jim Gordon Batman. In the wake of Batman's apparent death against the Joker, plans for a new Batman were discussed, with Powers International laying the groundwork for a Batman-inspired task force. Their first candidate chosen to model this program was Jim Gordon, of course, who was initially hesitant to fill Batman's shoes but eventually agreed. Going through intense government training and getting surgical muscle implants, Gordon was given the first model of a new Batman robot armor, which he nicknamed Rookie, and took to the streets as the new Batman. By complete chance, he ends up finding Bruce Wayne and informs him that he's taking up the reins as Batman. As Gordon hears several different reports about Bruce Wayne being found dead throughout Gotham, he works with Batman to figure out that a Batman from an alternate dark universe, known as the Batman Who Laughs, is the one responsible. Tracking him down, Gordon seeks help from his estranged son, James Jr. However, another dark version of Batman arrives and introduces himself as the Grim Knight. But it's certainly jarring to see Batman go from like this big bulky hero to the lanky and, sorry to say, old Jim Gordon. He even looks fragile. And at 9, Wonder Girl. Yara Flor from the tribe of Amazons from the Amazon is the new Wonder Woman in Future State, who, in the absence of Princess Diana, came out of obscurity from the heart of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil to protect man's world from the magic that is within it. Yara Flor is a demigod who hails not from the island of Themyscira, but from the Amazon rainforest in South America. She has a faithful winged steed, Jerry, and along with her friend Kapora, a forest guardian spirit, Yara travels to the underworld to rescue one of her Themyscirian sisters from the clutches of Hades, the Olympian god of the dead. Yeah, a sister that she's never even met before. Yara is also an active member of the Justice League, although the new rules of the Justice League forbade fraternization amongst its members as a way to protect them individually and not have to go through the same tragedy that resulted in the dissolution of the previous League formation. Wonder Woman and Superman, John Kent, ended up becoming friends. It's also worth noting that despite always willing to work with her colleagues in the League, she's not happy to be a part of it. And at 8, Superboy. Now this seems like it's cheating since there are multiple people who use the Superboy mantle. However, the one that had the most makeovers has seemingly been Con-El, otherwise known as Connor Kent, with an E, because they're not cool like I am. If you read one version of Connor and then read a couple series later, you might not realize what's been going on. This man has gone through more looks than any teenager getting ready for a date in a Disney Channel movie. Not to mention the time where he merged with Spider-Man, after Spider-Man somehow defeated him. Superboy was created by Project Cadmus using Kryptonian DNA, intended as a replacement for Superman, who died fighting Doomsday. Artificially aged to his mid-teens and implanted with the equivalent of a high school education, Superboy was set free by the New Boys Legion before he could actually be implemented with safeguards to control him. One of the boys gave him a leather jacket before he set out to the city, where he had his first encounter with a villain when he found Sidearm attempting to steal money from an ATM. But since then, he's gone through like 2 other costumes and a load of different centuries, the most recent version coming from like the 30th century. So, yeah. And at 7, Hippolyta. Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazons and ruler of Themyscira. She is also the mother of Wonder Woman. In the Harley Quinn animated series, Queen Hippolyta first appears in the episode Bachelorette, after being enslaved by Eris, who takes control of Themyscira and turns it into a spa resort, planning to sell it to Lex Luthor. However, Harley Quinn discovers her plan and along with her friends takes down Eris and saves the queen and Themyscira. To thank them and celebrate their victory, she throws a rager. And in Something Borrowed, Something Green, the queen appears as a guest at Poison Ivy's failed wedding, to Kite Man and the old Gotham corn factory alongside some of her subjects. But the Queen of Themyscira being mind controlled, that seems fairly ridiculous, okay? Even if she was mind controlled by the goddess of Discord, at that point, she might as well have just been able to tell us what games our friends were playing, okay? Harley Quinn, like, they discovered her plan and took her down as a part of her bachelorette party for Poison Ivy. But if they could do that, how could Wonder Woman's mother not fight her off? Seems kinda lame. And at 6, Wally West. Wally's lightning color has shifted based on various circumstances before. After escaping the Speed Force, his energy shifted from yellow to white due to his connection to the Speed Force growing stronger. And Wally's lightning later evolved to an indigo blue cosmic energy, and this was most notable when he united with the Mobius chair. Learning his children were inhabitants of a new dark multiverse Earth created by his own fears of losing them, an Earth that Tempest Fugonaut was now tasking him with destroying. Wally spent one last day with his kids, spending a nice dinner with them and giving them one last kiss before deciding to make his move, knowing what needed to be done. So he forced Tempest to promise him to get his kids to the Earth once he acted, leading Wally to sit on the Mobius chair and obtain its knowledge and power. The new godlike Wally just watched stuff and then just kind of destroyed everything. But he also realized that the chair was now infused with the power of Dr. Manhattan, and he could just do more than just sit and watch. Yeah, an omniscient Flash? That's pretty traumatic.
Number 5, Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4, Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that basically all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that that version of Onslaught has like the black suit to now the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3, One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we'd later learn that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have like a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2, Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways. Whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1, the leader. I doubt after all this time if the leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the one below all, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns.